Hi guys, gals, and MB pals, it's Elliot here. I'm coming to you this week with a serious video about some trans news stories that I felt I needed to address with you all. Trigger warning for those that need it. I tried to film this earlier and felt I didn't articulate myself well, so I'm giving it another go. Just a note that I'm relaying these from memory, so if I've missed a detail, I apologize. So the first story is about a 32-year-old trans man who had been off testosterone for some time, who went to the ER complaining about abdominal pains and that he had wet his pants. The triage nurse asked him some questions. He relayed that he was a transgender man, although he was listed correctly in their records as a man, and that earlier he had taken a pregnancy test that said it was positive, but he didn't think much of it. Well, the triage nurse noted that he was a man and listed his situation as non-urgent. And he went and he sat down in the ER for a very long time. Time passed, and it became very apparent that this man was in a lot of distress. When he went in the back to speak with the doctor, it was determined after a pregnancy test that he had been in labor for hours, that the pregnancy was not doing well, that he was preeclampsia, and that somehow the umbilical cord had dropped down and was at risk to the baby. When he delivered the baby, it was a stillborn, and the baby could have been saved if they had appropriately addressed that he could be pregnant when he arrived. This is a problem, and it's a problem that's in our healthcare a lot. Transgender people are treated like they don't exist. And we do. We exist. And it isn't always easy to determine what possible things could ail us. If the triage nurse had considered that he was a transgender man, like he had said, and had taken him seriously about the positive pregnancy test, this baby could have been saved. And what I'd like to say about this is, especially where we're so concerned about the value of life, or that we say we are, we're not, trans folk and intersex folk, we're not as rare as y'all think. We're in your lives every day. You see us at the supermarket. We're your neighbors. We're your children. We're your cousins. You went to school with us. You're not going to receive any kind of formal education teaching you how to interact with us. Not in medical school. So healthcare professionals, I'm asking you to take the responsibility to educate yourselves on our bodies, because our health care is important, and our bodies are important, and our lives are important. Don't be this person. Don't be this triage nurse that could have saved a baby and didn't. Not only for the trans man that lost the baby, or the baby itself, but for yourself. You don't want to live with that. So the next story is about a trans woman, 23 years old, who was in a parking garage and backed into another vehicle. It was a fender bender, some cosmetic damage, and he got out of the vehicle. The guy that she hit and was extremely angry. Transphobic slurs, homophobic slurs being tossed her direction, screaming at her. This went on for a while. And then a dude and a group of dudes approached this man who was clearly very upset and aggressive and said, "If you pay me, I'll beat her up for you." And he did. And the men surrounded her and threw punches and kicks, one after another. And she miraculously survived. It was rightfully labeled a hate crime. So she filed a restraining order. And apparently that was denied. And they didn't actually keep these men from her. Law enforcement failed her in that way. And 2 weeks later, she was murdered by these men. And the police refused to label it a hate crime now that it was a murder. And that just shouldn't be. That shouldn't fly. She should be alive. And if law enforcement did their job, she would be alive. This happens a lot in domestic violence situations with women who don't leave abusive, patriarchal men because they know that law enforcement will do nothing. And even if they do grant a restraining order, they will do nothing to enforce it. It will be too late for them. And this needs to stop yesterday. I have a young person in my life that wants to grow up to be a police officer. At first, I was not too excited about that prospect for this person. But then I thought about it. And I said to myself, you know, I hope they do become a cop. And I hope when they're older, I'm granted the opportunity to have a conversation with them about stories like this. Stories about cops that didn't protect people that they could, or about cops that acted aggressively towards a race that was different than theirs. Stories about cops that incarcerated immigrants just because they were told that was the law. So that he can grow up, if he's a he can grow up to be a good cop. Because there are good cops. There are cops that go into it to protect and serve people. I just wish that these good cops would remain good cops. That when hard things come down the line, and it's a question of what is right versus what is legal, that they'll make a good decision to be a good cop. Even if it means that they're not a cop anymore. They'll still be a cop here. And I hope that they have the courage to recognize that. And I hope that you have the courage when you're in a situation like that nurse was in, when you could be temporarily labeled as possibly transphobic, if it means that you save the life of a trans guy's baby, if you list his situation as urgent, because you recognize that not everybody has a body that's just like yours. We're reaching a point in this country when you need to decide whose side you're on. You need to decide that when you're faced with that difficult decision, that you won't be a good person who stayed in a situation too long to make a bad decision. That you will fight for what's right, even when it's illegal, even when it makes you insecure around your peers, even when it others you. If it protects someone else, it was the right decision. Make that choice. Thanks, guys.